attorney. Do you solemnly state the testimony you may give in the cause now pending before this court shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat with us today. And for the record, same spell your first and last name, please.
Corbin Rheault, Corbin. My last name is Rheault.
Thank you. Sir, can you please tell us how it is that you're employed?
I serve as a detective for the Los Angeles Police Department.
And where are you assigned?
Robbery-Homicide Division.
What is your assignment at Robbery-Homicide?
My current assignment is I'm the training coordinator for the division.
Okay. How many years have you been employed now by the LAPD?
It'll be 29 years in June.
What does being in charge of the training coordinator for Robbery-Homicide mean?
I ensure all the detectives assigned to the division meet the standards and protocols that are subscribed by the California Police Officers Standards and Training.
And do you also run schools regarding undercover work?
I do. I coordinate and lead and train the department's undercover school.
Okay. Were you previously assigned to an undercover section based out of RHD?
Yes.
And what section is that?
That's the Special Investigation Section.
How many years were you assigned to SIS?
Approximately 13 years.
And during that period of time, did you work in an undercover capacity?
I did.
Okay. How many years have you been assigned to RHD, homicide?
I spent 2 years at Homicide Special Section before being assigned to the Special Investigation Section.
Did you also work for the cold case homicide section?
I did.
How many years were you assigned there?
Approximately just under 2 years.
Okay. And did you also previously work as a narcotics agent?
I did. I served as a special agent for the California Department of Justice.
I want to direct your attention back to either late on the night of Tuesday, March 7th or early Wednesday, March 8th. Did you have conversations with Detective Chris Gable and Barry Tellis, who were assigned to the Homicide Special Section at RHD at that time? March of 2017.
Thank you.
What did I say? Okay.
Yes, I did.
Thank you, Your Honor. And did they request that you, along with other individuals from SIS, conduct an undercover surveillance operation on a couple targets?
Yes.
And who were those individuals?
Robert Baker and Monica Sementilli.
Do you see the defendant, Monica Sementilli, here in court today?
I do.
Can you identify her, please?
She's seated to the left of defense counsel. She's wearing a tan blazer and a maroon blouse.
So indicating.
Thank you. Does she look much different today than she did back in
So ruled.
March of 2017?
Significantly different.
Showing you People's 14. Do you recognize the individual that you see here?
I do.
And who is that?
That's Robert Baker.
Is he one of the two individuals that you just discussed you were asked to target for surveillance?
That's correct.
All right. Were you also provided with vehicle information?
Yes.
And were you provided with vehicle information for Baker?
Yes.
What was that?
It was a black Ford Expedition.
And were you also supplied with vehicle information for the defendant?
Yes.
And what was that?
A black Ford F-150.
Okay. During the course of the surveillance operation, did you observe either or both of these vehicles?
Yes.
Which?
Saw the black Ford Expedition on occasion and the black Ford F-150 on occasion.
Showing you People's 141. You recognize what you see in these photographs?
Yes.
And looking at the license plate 85645N1, did you identify that as the license plate for this vehicle?
Yes.
Showing you People's 142, do you recognize the vehicle and plates that you see here?
Yes.
And with respect to the license plate in the bottom right corner, 6VYZ263, is that a license plate that previously was used on this particular vehicle belonging to Robert Baker, the Ford Expedition.
That's correct.
Were you also provided with residence locations for each of the targets?
Yes.
And what were those locations?
For Monica Sementilli, it was 5012 Queen Victoria Road
In Woodland Hills?
in Woodland Hills neighborhood of the city of Los Angeles.
Okay. And what about for Mr. Baker?
Mr. Baker, it was 6817 Independence Avenue, apartment 110 in the Canoga Park neighborhood of Los Angeles.
What was the approximate distance between those two locations, if you know?
Depending on what route that you took, 4 to 5 miles.
Okay. On the date of Thursday, March 9th of 2017, did your unit begin surveillance operations on the defendant and Mr. Baker?
Yes.
And prior to the surveillance operation, did your team have a briefing that day at 2 o'clock?
Yes.
All right. And were you informed that and did you go to a location where a tracker was installed on the defendant's Ford F-150?
Yes.
And where did that take place?
That was adjacent to the Laugh Factory comedy store off of Sunset Boulevard in the Hollywood area of Los Angeles.
Okay. Were you on the perimeter at that particular location that night?
I was present at the surveillance on the perimeter, although I did not witness the tracking device being installed.
Okay. And the next day, on Friday, March 10th of 2017, about 2 in the afternoon, again, did your unit conduct a briefing regarding the surveillance operation for that day?
Yes.
Okay. And did you locate Baker's Ford F-150 that day, you or someone in your unit?
It was actually Baker's Ford Expedition.
Sorry, Ford Expedition, thank you. Was that around 3 in the afternoon?
Yes.
Okay. And did you follow him in his Ford Expedition to a particular location?
The surveillance did.
Okay. Did you follow to a location as well?
Yes.
Okay, where to?
It was a strip mall off of Ventura Boulevard near Penfield, and there's a Ralph's there and also a Asian food restaurant.
Is there also a Starbucks in that particular strip mall and a Vons?
That was earlier, yes. He was first at a Starbucks before he went to the Ralph's.
Now, at some point, did you make observations regarding the defendant on that same date near that location?
When he was near the Starbucks?
The defendant.
I'm sorry, yes.
And where was that?
I observed her in her black F-150 get gas at a 76 gas station that was near the northwest corner of Penfield and Ventura.
Okay. And was that the same location where Baker had been observed just a short time prior?
That's correct.
Okay. And that was near also the Ralph's Market?
Yes.
Okay. And at that point, did you follow the defendant somewhere?
She left from the Union 76 gas station, but my partner and I did not follow her.
Okay. At some point, did you observe either or both the defendant and Baker parked near the Ralph's in that strip mall?
I learned that they did, but I did not make that observation. Okay. I learned it was reported on the radio that we use.
Okay. At some point in time, was it reported to you that both the defendant and Baker met up in the parking lot behind the Ralph's?
Explains what is susceptible conduct, it's overruled.
Go ahead.
Yes.
And is that located at 20060 Ventura Boulevard?
Yes, I believe so.
Was that at some time after maybe at 6:15 that night?
Yes.
A little after 6? Okay. And at some point in time, was it also reported to you that both the defendant and Baker left from the parking lot behind that Ralph's in her Ford F-150.
Yes,
And who was driving at that point in time?
I don't recall.
Okay. Do you have notes with you?
I do.
Can you identify those or look through your notes and see if that refreshes your recollection?
I can.
Thank you. Let me know when you've had an opportunity to do that.
Okay.
Were you able to refresh your recollection?
Yes.
And who was driving the Ford F-150 that night?
Robert Baker.
And do you know where they drove to?
I would have to check my notes again.
Okay, could you do that? Did that refresh your recollection?
They went back, yes.
Where did they travel?
They went back to the Queen Victoria residence.
The two of them together in her Ford F-150?
Yes,
Okay. Leaving his vehicle then in the parking lot of the Ralph's?
correct.
I want to move on to Monday, June 5th of 2017 at about 9 in the morning. Once again, did your team have a briefing that day regarding
Yes.
the surveillance operation to take place on the defendant and Baker?
Yes,
Okay. And at some point later that morning, did you set up on the Queen Victoria location?
yes.
Approximately what time is that?
I don't recall.
Okay. At some point in time, did you observe the defendant leave the location driving a new vehicle?
I did not make that observation, but I learned that she was.
Okay. At some point, did you see her driving to that same, did you ever see her driving that vehicle, the new vehicle, the Ford Mustang, to the Ralph's location?
No,
Okay. At about 4:20 in the afternoon, did you go to the location at 6817 Independence, the location we discussed earlier where Robert Baker resided?
yes,
Showing you Exhibit 188. Do you recognize the apartment building in the photograph on the left?
I do.
And at some point in time, did you go into this underground parking location?
Yes,
And what was your purpose?
to surreptitiously place a tracking device on Robert Baker's black Ford Expedition.
And if we look at the photograph to the right, does that appear to be the interior of the parking garage? And I believe, is this his vehicle here, the black Ford F-150?
Yes,
Okay. Is that, I'm sorry, I said it again, the black Ford Expedition, did he, is this the vehicle onto which you placed the tracker?
that's correct.
What's the purpose of the tracker?
Two purposes, but specifically, generally, trackers are used for two purposes. One is to find the location of the vehicle when you're not physically surveilling the car. Where was that vehicle at? And the route of travel it took and how long it stayed at a particular location. For this particular case, we used the tracking device as a locator to find out where the vehicle was at so that our surveillance would be more effective and efficient. And the reason for that is if we checked known locations for the suspect and his vehicle was not there, we would have no other locations to check. So having a tracking device on the vehicle puts us generally in the direction of the suspect as quickly as possible.
And does that tracker also allow you, through an accompanying program, to track where the vehicle goes when you're not surveilling?
That's correct.
Your Honor, I have another set of 3 photographs of the defendant. May they be marked as People's 192.
Yes.
Showing you Exhibit 192, looking at the photograph in the center, do you recognize this location?
Yes, that appears to be the underground parking garage at 6817 Independence Avenue.
I've ruled on this earlier. My ruling remains.
I have nothing further.
Yes, sir.
Detective, am I correct that you have, as a part of your extensive work with SIS and surveillance operations, you also have the ability to place listening devices when you're placing tracking devices to secure warrant?
No,
You've never placed a listening device?
like an overhear listening device?
Yes.
No,
Okay. And you made no application for doing so in this case, correct?
correct.
And in your surveillance that you were discussing earlier, you actually only participated in a very limited number of actual physical surveillance in this matter, correct?
Please let me think and I can count the number of days.
Of course.
4 days of surveillance, and then the 5th day was the arrest.
And how did you record your own personal observations in the case?
I didn't record personal observations, but there's a unit note taker. In this particular case, it was Detective Robert Krause, would take notes of what was observed and repeated over the radio.
Okay. So, and how did you relay your observations about what you personally saw?
If I made a significant observation during surveillance, I would repeat that observation over the radio so that all the people on the surveillance could hear it.
So am I correct, when you were reviewing notes earlier, are those your personal notes or not?
No, those are Robert Krause's notes that are taken for the unit for the surveillance that day.
Okay, but these are observations you're saying you made 8 years ago?
Well, it could be a little less than 8 years.
Let's say 7.5, okay? And you didn't record anything you saw yourself by writing it down, correct?
That's correct.
You didn't prepare any reports about your observations?
No.
So when you're talking about observing Ms. Sementilli in a basement in, when was it? When in the People's Exhibit that they just showed you, I believe it's 192, photographs of her posing in what looks to be a parking lot. When did you observe that?
I didn't testify that I observed that. Believe I was asked, do I recognize the background? And I do. It's consistent with the underground parking garage of 6817 Independence Avenue.
So you never, detective, observed at any time Miss Sementilli in these outfits being photographed?
No.
And can you tell us on what days your 4 days of participation in surveillance were?
This has all occurred in 2017. I believe it was March 9th, March 10th, June 5th, and June 6th.
Okay, and where did you observe Miss Sementilli on March 9th?
I don't believe I observed her on March 9th. My observation of Miss Sementilli would have been on March 10th when she was at the Union 76 gas station at Penfield and Ventura.
Okay. So you didn't make any observations at any time during March 9 of Ms. Sementilli?
No, I think at various times during the surveillance, I may have been behind her vehicle, but it was not a significant observation. It was merely watching the vehicle travel from point A to point B. It's not unless something significant. If they stop, if they have a conversation with somebody, things like that.
Okay. And how long did you follow Ms. Sementilli on March 9th?
Me personally, I don't recall the duration. The whole surveillance, I'd have to check the notes on how long we conducted surveillance that day, cumulatively as a team, but I don't track how long I'm behind her vehicle or vehicles that she may be in. We don't track that.
But at no point in whatever you were participating in on March 9, did you ever see her outside of the vehicle?
I don't remember if I saw her outside the vehicle personally.
Thank you, nothing further.
Anything further by the people?
Yes, briefly. In terms of a listening device, that would be a wiretap, correct?
That would be my understanding.
Okay. And in order to obtain a wiretap on somebody's phone, you would have to write a search warrant, correct?
A wiretap application, yes.
And a judge would sign off on that.
That's correct.
Your team never did any of that on this case.
That's correct.
In fact, you don't have any knowledge of any wiretaps in this particular case, do you?
Correct.
No. Okay. In terms of the documentation, when you were answering questions regarding the unit note takers, you explained to us that when SIS conducts a surveillance operation, that the point person is cast off depending on the location of each of the individuals in your team and the direction the targets travel.
That's correct.
And various individuals on the team will call out, as you explained on direct, over the radio as they're making their observations so that the rest of you can put yourself in a particular location.
Correct.
And the unit note taker, in this case, Detective Krause, he would be the person responsible for writing down the observations made by everybody that is a part of the surveillance op that day.
That's correct. And it's not a transcription of what occurred, but rather the significant events that were observed.
Okay. And in terms of that note taking, that would be notes that are made and documented as to who the individual is calling out that particular observation, correct?
That's correct.
As well as the time and location,
That's correct.
as the point is handed off between members of the surveillance team.
Yes.
So the individual that's making the observation, their name would be documented, even though you're not the one that is writing down the notes, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything further?
No, thank you.
Thank you, Detective Rheault. You're excused.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. At this time, people would like to call Ernie Valorano.
You may proceed.
Thank you. Detective Rheault, did you text detectives Byers and Farrell and me after you got back to your office after testifying this morning?
It was an email.
An email, sorry. And that there was something that you testified to this morning that you realized was incorrect.
That's correct.
Can you tell us what that was, please?
I believe I testified that after the defendant and Robert Baker met up at the Ralph's,
On which day was that?
March 10th, a little bit after 6 p.m. in the evening, I believe I testified that Robert Baker, drove the F-150 back up to the Queen Victoria Road residence. And when I looked at the notes more closely, I think I mixed that up. The notes indicated that it was the number 2 suspect, and the number 2 suspect corresponds with the defendant.
Okay, so the defendant's the one that drove Baker back in her Ford F-150 from that Ralph's location parking lot back to her home on Queen Victoria on March 10th.
That's correct.
Thank you.
And
I'm sorry.
yes, and to be clear, I did not make that observation. That observation was made by Detective Montoya
Which was relayed to you, as we discussed this morning.
over the radio, yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Detective Rheault. You're excused.
Thank you.
They call your next witness.
Thank you.